It's July 28th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with the ceremony marking the Korean War armistice. Marking the 70th anniversary this year, President Yoon expressed gratitude to the sacrifices of fallen heroes and highlighted the enduring significance of the UN forces in preserving peace on the Korean Peninsula. And on the same day up in the north, Pyongyang staged a much speculated military parade to celebrate what it calls a Victory Day. We take a closer look at what this parade means. Scientists say the month of July is set to be the world's hottest month on record. According to UN Chief Antonio Guterres, the Earth is now entering an era of global boiling. Marking 70 years of the armistice agreement signed to end active fighting of the Korean War, President Yoon honored the hundreds of thousands of UN forces who rushed to aid the Republic of Korea in defense of its peace and democracy. Our Oh Soo-young reports.
Solidarity for freedom is what the Republic of Korea stands for, grounded in the dedication of the United Nations forces who fought to defend the country. That's according to President Yoon speaking at a ceremony on Thursday, standing at the Busan Cinema Center, a former military airfield in the southern port city of Busan, where the UN troops first landed to fight alongside the South during the 1950-53 war. The ceremony marked the 70th anniversary of the Korean War Armistice Agreement, which ended active fighting and also coincides with the UN Forces Participation Day.
73년 전 자유세계의 수많은 젊은이들이 하나의 UN 깃발 아래 전혀 알지도 못하는 나라 대한민국의 자유를 지키기 위해 달려왔습니다. 오늘의 대한민국은 유엔군의 희생과 헌신 그리고 피 묻은 군복 위에 서 있습니다.
Yoon honored the more than 1.9 million UN troops from 22 countries who came to the South's aid following North Korea's illegal invasion. Calling the UN troops the country's true heroes, Yoon personally greeted the 62 UN veterans attending the event and presented awards to two veterans, the late Thomas Colon Parkinson from Australia and Donald Reed from the US. The president vowed to never forget their sacrifices and the bloodshed to fight communist forces, which enabled the South to grow as a liberal democracy and market economy. He noted that Busan City, which saw over 1 million refugees during the Korean War, is now the world's second largest transshipment port and a global logistics hub, with the city now preparing to host the World Expo 2030 and position itself as a platform to seek solutions to the challenges facing humanity. Yoon said South Korea will ensure the value of freedom extends to the future generations.
대한민국은 국제사회의 책임 있는 일원으로서 자유민주주의 국가들과 연대하고 한미 동맹을 핵심 축으로 하여 인도 태평양 지역뿐 아니라 전 세계의 자유, 평화, 번영을 위해 노력할 것입니다.
US President Joe Biden on Wednesday had declared July 27th National Korean War Veterans Armistice Day, calling the ROK-U.S. alliance the linchpin of peace, stability and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific region and around the world. Ahead of the ceremony, President Yoon and First Lady Kim Gon-hee were joined by government officials from the 22 countries comprising the UN forces to pay their respects at the United Nations Memorial Cemetery. The burial ground in Busan is the only UN cemetery in the world. More than 2,300 people from 11 countries lie at rest there. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
And marking the same occasion, North Korea staged a widely expected military parade on Thursday night. Now, the event appears to have started at around 8 p.m. and went on for about 2 hours. Government delegations of China and Russia who had come to Pyongyang this week likely attended the parade. Now, whether North Korean leader Kim Jong-un made a speech during the event is unknown. Radio Free Asia revealed a satellite image of the parade, which appeared to show unmanned aerial vehicles and ICBMs. Russian President Vladimir Putin also delivered a message to the North Korean leader on Thursday, saying that their history of bilateral ties has led to a stronger economic and security relationship. Let's delve deeper into the North's military parade to mark Victory Day, as it is known by the regime. For more, we're joined by Andrew Yeh. He's a senior fellow at Brookings Center for East Asia Policy Studies. Thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, the military parade marking the North's so-called Victory Day was no surprise, right, as the regime has done so in the past. But what makes this year's parade significant or different from previous ones?
Sure. As you mentioned, North Korea conducts parades somewhat regularly, but this one is quite significant because of who was in the audience at this particular time. Remember, North Korea still has their pandemic border lockdown, but they invited dignitaries from Russia and from China to observe this parade. And I think they wanted to put on a show, and they wanted to show that there was solidarity among these countries. So I think that is something that's significant about this year's parade, that they would invite outsiders even during the time of the pandemic lockdown.
Sure. Now, no details we don't know yet, since no footage from the parade had been released as of Friday morning, which is now at the moment. But do you believe the North has showed off new weaponry at the parade at this time again?
We haven't seen extensive footage yet of this parade. I'm pretty sure that they would have displayed their missiles, their rockets. This is just standard fare for a North Korean parade. It's unclear, though, whether they would show any new hardware, maybe some of their long-range ICBMs, but we really don't know unless we see the footage, but I wouldn't be surprised if they showed some of their most advanced weaponry on display.
Right. Andrew, you pointed out that it is exceptional and rare that delegations from other countries, including China and Russia, have been invited to the North this time, especially after all the pandemic years right now. How rare is this? What does it say about the trilateral partnership that they insist between Pyongyang, Moscow, and Beijing?
Right. So I don't think it's rare in the past to have dignitaries from other foreign dignitaries come to Pyongyang, but like we mentioned earlier, it was in this middle of this pandemic lockdown, but also especially the Russian defense minister, Sergei Shoigu, he attended this event. Now, that's a very high-level official, and there are other meetings as well. And so it really shows, again, the solidarity between these three countries. Of course, these are three countries that have been on the opposing end of the United States and its allies in the Indo-Pacific. So we really are seeing, I think, this hardening of autocracies and then democracies on the other side with South Korea and the United States. So I do think that this is quite telling to see members of these three countries, especially the defense minister from Russia, attending this event.
Right, because we all know Russia's defense minister, Shoigu, is one of the most occupied people at the moment with the war in Ukraine going on, right?
Yes, and it's got to suggest that maybe they are having discussions about militaries, about what sorts of aid that North Korea might provide to Russia and vice versa.
Right. And now, some experts say it is highly likely that North Korea has provided weapons to Russia, right, for its offensive in the Ukraine crisis. Now, are you on the same page? If it's the case, what kind of aid or support can the North receive from Russia in return?
Yeah, so there must be something in return for North Korea if North Korea is providing weapons to either Russia directly or the Wagner Group. But I would think that Russia has some technical expertise that they might be able to provide to North Korea related to missile launches, rocket launches, and satellites. North Korea had a failed rocket test trying to launch a satellite a few weeks ago, and that's something that perhaps Russia can provide support in. And also there might be, these are all sanctioned, but there might be ways where Russia could provide humanitarian assistance, food, or fuel. But of course, I think for Russia, it's a defense minister, so they must have talked about armaments, weapons, and that sort of thing. So certainly there's those two countries are looking to support one another because they've been really ostracized by other countries at this point.
Right. North Korea, Russia could definitely are owing something to one another at the moment, definitely, right?
Yes, I agree.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us all the way from DC this morning. You have a good night.
Thank you. Have a good day.
The European Central Bank on Thursday went ahead with its ninth straight interest rate hike, announcing a 25 basis point hike. Now, that brings the main lending rate in the Eurozone to 4.25%. The Frankfurt-based bank said in a statement that while inflation may be slowing, it has remained too high for too long. The ECB also raised its deposit rate to a historic high from 3.5% to 3.75%. The bank's president, Christine Lagarde, hinted that there could be further hikes in the next rate-setting meeting in September. July 2023, this month, has been the hottest month since records began. The UN chief also warned that the era of global warming has now ended as the era of global boiling has arrived. Lee Seung-ja has more.
July 2023, even with a few more days left to go, is still set to become the hottest month on human record. That's according to the World Meteorological Organization in a report published Thursday, which noted that the heat this month has been so extreme that it's virtually certain this month will break records by a significant margin. It added that the world has seen the hottest 3-week period on record in more than 100,000 years, with figures based on average air temperature across the entire world. The global average air temperature in the first 23 days of July was 16.95 degrees Celsius, far above the previous record of 16.63 degrees Celsius recorded in July 2019. In response to the alarming figures, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres on Thursday warned that the era of global warming has ended and that the era of global boiling has now arrived.
Climate change is here, it is terrifying, and it is just the beginning. The era of global warming has ended, the era of global boiling has arrived. The air is unbreathable, the heat is unbearable.
Stressing that the level of fossil fuel profits and climate inaction is unacceptable, Guterres called on world leaders to stop making excuses and begin making substantial changes now. Meanwhile, in response to the record heat the U.S. is experiencing this summer, U.S. President Joe Biden said at the White House on Thursday that the high temperatures will be more severe in the future, adding that no one can deny climate change. While mentioning that more than 600 deaths occur every year due to high temperatures in the U.S., he announced new steps to protect workers, including a hazard alert notifying employers and employees of ways to protect themselves from the intense heat. The latest announcement from Biden comes as nearly 40% of the U.S. population is facing heat advisories, according to a recent report by the National Weather Service. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Revisions to South Korea's tax code were published on Thursday. One of the main goals is to make the country's key industries global frontrunners. Ji-young reports.
Boosting the competitiveness of South Korean companies for stronger economic growth and helping people's livelihoods. This is what the country's latest revision to the tax code published on Thursday mainly aims to do, as well as prepare for the future.
This year's tax revision has put emphasis on providing strong support for South Korean firms to better compete in the global market, including those in the Korean content industries and national strategic technology.
One of the highlights would be sharply raising tax relief for Korean content makers so that more K-dramas, movies, and reality shows can be brought to the world. After the change, for expenses spent on content production, the government will grant up to 15% of tax credits for conglomerates, 20% for strong medium-sized firms, and 30% for small and mid-sized companies. The tax code revision also aims to provide higher tax relief for firms investing in the semiconductor industry and other strategic sectors that'll drive growth for the country, known as the K-CHIPS Act. Tax credits for conglomerates investing in chip facilities will be up to 25%, and small and medium companies will be getting up to 35%. Also, there would be greater tax benefits for companies returning to the country from offshore operations by providing them 100% of income and corporate tax cuts for the first 7 years and 50% in the following 3 years. Another major part would be reducing the tax burden for small and mid-sized family businesses when it comes to inheriting them by putting more companies into the lowest tax bracket of 10%. The term for payment will also be dramatically extended from the current 5 years to 20. With all the changes, the government says the tax code revision will result in a roughly $390 million drop in tax revenue. But the finance minister explained, although it is a difficult time, the tax incentives were allocated to much-needed areas, including prompting corporate investment and child subsidies. 엄지영, Arirang News.
Now, the tax code revisions also seek to upgrade the well-being of the people in South Korea as well as future generations through, again, more tax incentives. Our Lee Soo-jin tells us more.
South Korea's revision to the tax code this year includes measures aimed at boosting the local economy. The latest tax revision published on Thursday by the Finance Ministry seeks to expand tax benefits not just for newlyweds but also for the lower and middle classes.
We plan to increase support for the lower and middle classes to help the private economy recover quickly and to actively address structural issues such as the population decline.
The most highly anticipated tax revision was arguably the tax exemption on funds gifted by parents to their children when they get married. The government has decided to expand the threshold from $39,000 to around $117,000 for inheritances given by parents to their children 2 years before or after the date of their marriage registration. In a more direct move to help boost birth rates, the government will also increase payments provided to families from around $620 to around $780 per child. The income limit for families eligible was also raised from around $31,000 to nearly $55,000. In addition, taxpayers can qualify for tax credit rates that amount to 15% of medical expenses that exceeded 3% of their total income. The tax credit limit of around $5,500, however, will no longer apply to children under the age of 6 starting next year. It's also not just people that are benefiting.
VAT exemptions will be applied to more than 100 types of pet medical expenses starting October this year.
The government is also looking to improve people's livelihoods. It will raise income tax deduction rates by 10 percentage points for credit card expenditure between April and December next year at traditional markets and on recreational activities. The 2023 tax reform bill, which will be submitted to the National Assembly in September, is expected to go into effect next year. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
Following the extreme rain here in the country, lawmakers passed the Rivers Act revision as a response to the catastrophic flooding and landslides that resulted in nearly 50 deaths. Our political correspondent Kim Jung-soo reports.
I declare that the amendment has been passed.
A revision to the Rivers Act intended to support the implementation of anti-flooding measures was passed by the National Assembly with 249 votes in favor out of the 250 lawmakers present. The bill was passed in a plenary session with an overwhelming approval rate regardless of political party. The swift decision came about 2 weeks after catastrophic flooding and landslides in central South Korea took nearly 50 lives and ruined people's homes and livelihoods. At least 14 people died when a river burst its banks due to heavy rain and flooded an underpass in Osong in a matter of minutes. Until now, local governments were responsible for these regional rivers and they experienced budgetary problems for maintenance and repair.
The amendment allows the state to provide financial support for the maintenance of designated regional rivers currently conducted by local governments whose water levels may change due to potential flooding downstream by rivers maintained by the state.
The Assembly also passed revisions to water system management and support for residents near the Keumgang, Nakdonggang, Yeongsangang, and Seomjingang rivers. With the revision setting the legal framework for water-related disasters such as droughts and floods, these residents can use the water system management budget for disaster prevention measures. The revised laws will be enacted as soon as the government publishes it. The legislation for the Anti-Flooding Act in urban areas, on the other hand, was not discussed at Thursday's plenary session. The main part of the act is to establish a National Countermeasures Committee under the Environment Minister and to systematically promote urban flood prevention plans with other related ministries. The National Assembly Legislation and Judiciary Committee said since it's a legislative action, more discussion is needed, but it also added that the goal is to process the legislation at next month's plenary session. Kim Jung-sil, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Matthew Ashley, and we now turn over to stories from around the world. We begin in Russia, where President Vladimir Putin on Thursday promised free grain to 6 African nations. Now, the promise was made on the first day of a 2-day Russia-Africa summit in St. Petersburg. Putin said that Burkina Faso, Zimbabwe, Mali, Somalia, the Central African Republic, and Eritrea will each receive 25 to 50,000 metric tons of grain at no cost. Now, the offer follows the collapse of the Black Sea deal, which allowed Ukraine to export grain worldwide and helped reduce soaring food prices. Russia refused to renew the deal, claiming that Western sanctions were limiting the sale of its agricultural products abroad. Russia's promise has been criticized by the United Nations, which described it as a handful of donations to some countries. The UN also said it won't have the same impact as the previous grain deal. Now, supporters of the coup which ousted Niger's President Mohamed Bazoum have set fire to the headquarters of the ousted ruling party in the capital of Niamey. Now, the attack on Thursday came after Niger's army pledged its support for the coup's leaders. The coup started on Wednesday when the Presidential Guard took the president captive by sealing off access to the presidential residence and offices using military vehicles. This over what the Guard said was a deteriorating security situation and poor economic governance. Now, the coup has received global condemnation, including from the United Nations, the United States, France, and Russia, who have demanded the release of the president. It's unknown who has taken charge in the country, as no leader has been announced. Now, a Ukrainian fencer has been disqualified from the World Fencing Championships in Milan for refusing to shake the hand of her Russian opponent. 4-time Olympic medalist and world champion Olga Karlan beat Russian Anna Smirnova, who was competing under a neutral flag. But after her win, Karlan refused to shake hands, instead offering her saber to tap blades. In fencing rules, not shaking hands can result in a black card. Smirnova refused the blade tap, instead staging a protest and speaking to several tournament officials. But Karlan is not the only Ukrainian athlete to refuse a handshake with a Russian opponent, with others, including some tennis players, also refusing the gesture.
Good morning. Much of Korea is enduring the toughest time of the year with intense heat continuing to sear. And afternoon temperatures will be hovering around 35 degrees Celsius this afternoon. Also, 5 to 40 millimeters of sudden rain showers are in the forecast this afternoon, possibly getting more than 60 millimeters along with thunder and lightning. Well, despite the chance of rain, we need to stay safe in the sun. Blazing sunshine will beam down this afternoon. So if you're in Korea, I highly suggest you get an umbrella that gives both sun and rain protection and keep it handy. Hope you got a decent sleep. It was a warm night, and this afternoon, Seoul, Daejeon, and Chuncheon will be going up to 34, Gyeongju topping out at 36 degrees. And we'll have a similar weather pattern to today through the weekend. Drink plenty of water and take regular breaks when going outdoors. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. We'll be back next Monday at 9 a.m. Korea time. Have a good day.